Nixyáawi.
Nixyáawi tāpalix.
Nixyáawi tāpalix. Níix máycqi.
Isu.
Swiyanawichi máycqi pa.
So now Samson to inhin paishin Nixyáawi. Hey Annie. Nixyáawi.
Nixyáawi.
Inúna tímaš. Kunam niyáaš email and nawatsta and the muni wata spam annam ku wacham UMA101, 102, 103. Níix. So that's
I'm double checking with Daniel.
So nothing for now though, but until next fall.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I can go to Gathering of Nations. All right. Hey, Bobby.
Hello.
Miss Skuulitpama.
I forgot my laptop. I'm gonna use my phone.
Oh, yeah. Nixyáawi we wallet it pa. Nixyáawi we wallet it pa. Nixwati wan tamatash nisku pawiya kunki COVID kni. You know, I did get sick from the sickness finally. I finally caught it. And, you know, I didn't expect to, but same time I had I knew that I was chancing it going here and going there, you know, with family services and stuff. But even though I was remaining masked here and there, finally, you know, start having the symptoms of a runny nose, watery eyes, coughing, sneezing. So when I went to go take my test, and the first thing I wanted to do was take my test. And so they did test me and said I was positive. So I went into quarantine and isolation, you know, for, you know, I just got off this past Monday. And I didn't have the, you know, the terrible, you know, I didn't have trouble breathing. I didn't have maybe real, you know, a lot of maybe the other symptoms that would really, you know, that somehow some were affected. So I feel good about that I pretty much getting through this. One of my elders, he wrote to me and he shut me shanash, and I was sharing this with Jefferson too, and the mishi ukʷana and the niyáaw and the kushkwai sinwit ʻiipn. He asked me ʻiipn, and I didn't know that word, and right away I go to my dictionary, you know, and I start looking up ʻiip or whatever. But ʻiip has a sense of like when you're like almost like when you're putting maybe a thread through the needle, you know. It's tina. I think it has that implication. So I think so. He was probably telling me, asking me if I've gotten through this, if I went through it, you know. So yeah, I was got through it, and you know, and had to tend to a family service, and you know, and took care of that, and a lot of that in our family circles, you know, I had to let my family know, you know, just a few of us that were there. And it says, you know, I was the youngest cousin, and out of all the older cousins, myself and Mildred, my older sister, we were the fortunate ones to have caught that last piece of our grandmother and uncle to be able to pick up the language. And so it's basically like myself, Thomas, and Mildred, and you know, that are still fluent. And so we're really reaching out, you know, to talk to the kids and the awku pawata and the kupawa. We got into the ukʷana. You know, how are they going to be as they go along without knowing anything, nwityaw, you know, about the language. So hopefully put that bug in their ear. Yeah. But I want to welcome Jefferson. Jefferson is his Indian name is Isu. So I'm allow you to share a little bit there, Jefferson, with our, we're the regulars.
Oh, Payo Níix matashkinon, Shanana Tashwa, Barnes and Noble pa, Akino Tash Klach Maman, Payo Kotlami Nixyáawi, Chikuk, Kukino tímaš, Chikuk, inmi wanich tanan tumtki nashwa iso, Warm Springs Kanishwa, Kushia Patumtki wa Jefferson Green, inmi Katlai Wanishana, Sasawipum, tanan tumtki. Ku tela iwanishana wacha iso kushki inai ku chiapatumtki pawanishana verbena green and Perry green. And so me Nixyáawi Skuulitpamápa naami itiskinsinuitna paishi wacha 2013 on which anakush pa wacha paknau inchima pa shapnishama paish pa wacha pinapo Skuulitpama kuna culture and heritage pa Warm Springs pa ku jana shekosha tachtun tanan tumtki awata Nixyáawi taman wakatnam yaw shukwatash on the kush sinwitna. So I was just saying, you know, I got here in about 2013 is when I started taking on language. Before that, I was learning a lot of songs, grew up around the Longhouse and Lumped and Washat, but never had picked up the language in those days because most elders spoke to each other and not so much to the kids in those days or even to their own kids. And so for a lot of different reasons, you know, my grandma tells a story and I have her on a recording talking about how she wasn't able to speak her language in the boarding school and what they did to her for speaking the language. But she did retain it. And when she retained it, she became a teacher probably in her later years. So her name is on our dictionary and your dictionary. The children's books, you can Google Verbena Green and you'll find her children's books on the internet from her heyday. And so just happy to be here. And thank you, Tautolix, for providing the time today and sharing your knowledge, and each and every one of you for the commitment that you've provided. There'd been a few other times I tried to log on and it just wouldn't work out for some reason. Maybe I need to pay my bill. So
yeah,
Níix matashkinon chikuk.
Koslana, Níix namsinwi, and the Níix and the kunam washati. You're paid up. Yeah. I would quite plush Tímaš Jonathan. So I don't know, you might have met Jonathan.
Hey.
Jonathan, you are naami tímašla Níix yashuksha manina tímaša. Picking it up pretty good how we write.
Watem itimana kutkatawas pa.
Oh, Níix kwai. naku kapile ukʷana. Jonathan, you want to share what you just recently acquired?
Hey, so I just got a copy of the latest edition of nwityaw. Shoot, thing's not reversed. But the latest version of the Yakima Legends and Stories book, and I started reading it. It's pretty good. They do a fantastic job of contextualizing everything. Big fan.
Tuniwa contextualize.
You know, to explain certain things that one needs to know to properly understand the stories, like when you would hear these stories, what their purpose is. In this case, they bring up, you know, these are for teaching. These stories are shared to teach the young ones how to behave and how to do the things that they'll need to do to survive in the world. Stuff like that is what I mean by contextualizing. In this case specifically, to pointing out like where things happened using maps and whatnot.
Níix.
Contextualize is one of my $10 words that I like to use. It's a good one.
Jean, Níix máycqi. Mɨna wina.
máycqi, mishnamwa,
Níix nashwa.
Níix,
How you doing, mishnamwa?
chikuk.
Kamish. Good to see you're smiling and healthy.
Níix. Good to see you're smiling and healthy.
Hey. So you've been with us what about a year now, huh? About a year you've been logging on regularly.
Ye.
How do you feel about your language learning so far?
Boy, I love it. I really appreciate it, and I like when you give us, like Jonathan says, the context, what's around it that makes those words matter in that particular way you say them. And I really appreciate that. That's the gift you're giving all of us. Thank you. Kwatla.
Oh, kumish. Kumish. Hey, Mercedes, laakɨnx, ʻiipn, I need to get your name down a little more in my mind to be able to acknowledge you with your Indian name, Mercedes. Oh yeah, tímaš. Timak kwai Jonathan and the kupun Mercedes Nixya tímaš. Nixya tímaš. Does that how is it with a T, just not a K, right?
That's right.
Oh, tímaš.
Yeah.
Kumish. Tímaš. Oh, kumish. Skuulitpama ashapnishana inmi ititamała Skuulitpama Nixyáawi Skuulitpamaapa and awku pɨnmi fit naami nwityaw. Earlier, you know, sometimes I almost like come to a standstill, but just to kind of get some feedback from the students from Nixyáawi School, I was asking them, I says, what's your thoughts on the language? And it was interesting. You know, of course, they all say that it's important. You know, ʻiwā'atau, it's important. Naami niyáaš. So you know, for them, in their sense, you know, they already, some of them are already thinking that, you know, that one day that when they have children, that they're going to have to be able to teach their children. You know, when they grow older, or they got younger siblings even, you know, to be able to teach them. and the kush subsequent is kuma. And but one student, you know, he just kind of just came out and said it and says, you know, the language is really underappreciated, you know, and it was kind of like trying to figure out how to say something like that. Like unappreciated, and you know, and I guess you would just probably to say like chaupa kichkencha. Chaupa kichkencha is like would be saying chaupa kichkencha is like they don't pay attention to it. You know, some don't pay attention to it. And I'm not sure if I put a word of kichkani out there that well, if that was an actual way to say something, but it was just, but that chaupa kichkencha, you know, and so it and of course I nishwa anna, you know, as I told him, and of course we it is anna, I kush pawiya. That's how it's been, you know, from years back. And of course, you know, some of them didn't pay attention to it. And naku awacha nakush nam shapashukwachta shapon mis sinwit na shapaskulit mishtun. You know, so at the time there was times that it was stated that, you know, you have to learn the white man's way. Hey, Chewy. And, you know, so that was, you know, like the ones that are the elders now, like in their 80s, they're the ones that were sent off to school to go learn trades, you know, the relocation act, you know, they went away. And then some of them came back and, you know, really helped the tribe and, or whatever. And so it wasn't always just the Chanamun Chising Iwachan the Kush Isikwat Mishkwiam Shapon Mi. It wasn't just about the teaching of the white man's religion. Iwachan the Kush Shapashukwatash and the Mani Pawata Naknui. You know, it was also about like how were they going to be taken care of, and one of those ways that they had to be taken care of was to have to learn something, a trade. And so like a lot of women maybe went off to go be nurses or dentists, dental assistants, as well as the men, you know, for, you know, trades of welding, carpentry, or mechanics, what have you. And the kuchiao cook, Yanashmaman, you know, so like I was saying, I wanted to know what was their thoughts. Tun awat to pɨnmi khwit or mishtun iwa pɨnmi khwit naami nwityaw. And so I kind of thought that maybe it'd be a good idea to, you know, to continue to touch on this with ourselves, and how things are, you know, for ourselves, for, you know, what our thoughts are on where we are with the language today. And I think it's great that, you know, that we have the opportunity to teach it at lumped Chinuk Skuulitpamaapa. That's what I dubbed the Blue Mountain Community College, lumped Chinuk Blue Mountains Skuulitpamaapa. Nixyáawi Geary.
Níix maskenon Geary.
Nixyáawi.
Yeah. Must be working out of home, huh? At the house.
No, I'm at work
Oh,
in my office.
oh, commish.
Yeah, we got our having trouble hooking it up in our classroom, so had to use my work one.
Oh, commish. Do you guys have You guys have lessons there too with nimi.
Yeah,
How's that going for you guys?
it's going okay. We got some older stuff that we have, but when we got laid off for that year, that really set us back.
So the kids, they're picking it up though, huh? Your kids as well as maybe others.
Yeah, slowly, just a few of them. There's not a lot of them.
Yeah. Is your guys' language in the schools or in the like the little programs or anything, tribal programs?
Yeah, they're a little bit at Head Start and the Nixyáawi School, and our apprentices are going to start to go to the high school here pretty soon.
Oh, commission. And that's for nimi putim, eh? Commission.
If I may share a little bit about what you were asking your students, you know, it's kind of the same here, you know, with the interest, you know, but on a lighter note, since COVID, nwityaw, you know, a couple of years ago, when it came, we've had a lot of older drummers, that stepped back, you know, for safety reasons. But just before COVID, we were doing Sunday services pretty consistently in Warm Springs at our longhouses, and just inviting folks, you know, tell them come eat, you know, come be around, and that ended up kind of creating a movement. And so when COVID hit, there was a lot of young drummers that ended up stepping in. So I think our youngest drummer is about 20, 21. He comes pretty regularly to everything. And I think one of our I'd say a new drummer, but he's an older gentleman that had never drummed before, but he comes pretty regular too. And he's about 40 something years old. But there's a lot of new drummers, I guess, so to say, various in ages. And they've been really soaking in and asking a lot of questions to, you know, myself and elders that are familiar with the language. And so they've really been stepping, you know, that interest has really came about in the last couple of years to, especially when you're singing Washat, you know, you want to know what you're singing about. And so that's where a lot of our interest is. And so we haven't started a, you know, kind of a class, because we used to even do like a Washat class, so to say, you know, that where we'd have a couple of elders that would come and interpret a song, and we'd probably spend a whole hour talking about spirituality and the story related to that song, and we were doing that years ago. That's kind of what got me into language, going to that class where those elders would break it down and they'd really translate verbatim almost, you know, on the Washat songs. And so, and that really, you know, helped us, you know, with our spiritual walk, so to say. But that's where we are. So.
You know, I was you know, thinking about you know, I had the thought to Vaishna anakonatachna nekush tapaskulit isikotash of taik ukʷana washat me of taikashna nekukunafash diwat tani and kushpa natawa nichin fa tamsinwe of taik. You know, like how that our songs that the thought of like we should have like the same thing. You know, and that we would be, you know, sharing what the words are in those, the words that are in the songs, and it's a lifelong learning process. And we have one young boy that he's I think he's a freshman. Waptis Brocky, and anyway, he's being raised by his stepfather and his mother in the longhouse, and so nowadays they had an initiation, and the kumun pashpatutia, they stood him up. Pachnauma, aswanma, katma. Those teenage boys, they stood him up in the ku and the kushpa. How there's a word for that when they first bring him out to sing, but that was the first time I'd ever seen something like that. But the older ones, the stepfathers or the fathers, they decided to do an initiation for them, and so this one boy. I've been, giving him that place. Winpan kulis and the kunam, well, take that, grab a drum and you're going to sing, And so he's been a wash it dancer, and he understands the bell ringing part, and so it just kind of that's encouraging to us, as the older ones, that we see that. And I can imagine how that must have been for when we were doing that as youngsters, when we were doing that, and I remember saying that I'm doing this for my grandma, it was like, I'm doing this to make my grandma proud, but yet one of my elders in the kui, Nixyáawi Skuulitpama, it's for yourself, it's for yourself. And İpn to work on your own life. So that's how that kind of brought that to my attention. And today I do understand that. So sometimes I'll share those kind of thoughts in our, when I try not to get on like a preaching mode either, though. Just talk about, but we were given that opportunity to follow something, and but ycqi naami and ycqi. Write that down, Jonathan. Naami and ycqi. Anatun na atwanata nwityaw. That a nwityaw to be one word. Nwityaw. Ycqi. So our elders, they taught us what to follow as a belief. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? It's open to whatever that you might be thinking, whether if it's on belief or however that we're, in our discussion here. Awku nishakinun inmi tímaš inmi tilanmi kuiwa to I awku kuniguchaw ukʷana nishini wacha. Looking at my grandfather's papers, because mima wanich naami naimumam, looking at the old papers of my grandfather, and especially old names. It's like my grandmother, my katla, inmi katla, awacha anai wanitch the kuma pawacha wanitchi. Their names, like my great grandfather, his name was Jake Tulala, how it's spelled. But there's a little piece in those probate papers where my grandmother's husband, my Tilla, that he was testifying, and then I just kind of shared that with my niece of that name, is so that Billy Mackay said his grandmother, his wife's name, my grandmother, her name was Annie Kunam, and then but then he said, or her Indian name was Kunam, but her last name was actually pronounced Tulalitsa, and yeah, so it was something to kind of start trying to decipher, a name like that. And a tun iwa and the kush Tulalitsa. And it's something how in some of our names, our supposed Yakima names, that we can't find maybe some of the pronunciations in Yakima dictionary. When I go to Nez Perce dictionary, I find some references. Yeah, I noticed that in some of those, like Grandpa Billy Mackay, his old Indian name was spelled AWEO. And I don't see that for a reference for sleep or anything in Umatilla or Yakima, but when I looked in Nez Perce, it has a barred, it has the lamp, the glottal, then it has an E, and I think it has another glottal, and then a WI, and an accented I. Yeah, and so imagine that, awiusa, imagine it would have been said that, awiusa, or sleeping. Taukum slapai shiwachai, the sleepyhead. Used to think, oh, maybe I'll take that name, Grandpa's name. Nah, I want to be a sleepyhead. But this is Chikushiwa and Kush Sapashikotai, naami Shmiya, and this is how it is, for us to know and learn, to try to teach our children, naami Shmiya. Ticham Kilusla Tunam Fisha.
Mish?
How you thinking today about whatever?
Oh, I'm just soaking it all in, thinking about. Yeah, I feel like I'm making a lot of progress and learning. I know a lot more than I did a year ago, but it feels sometimes it feels like I'm learning really slow.
Jefferson aku Bobby namani muni ʻiipn pin ko Rajna ako mimi pawiya. They had decided tanan wanitch na they decided that they're going to, get Indian names. Nixyáawi patin nwityaw and Umatilla, pawa Nixya tanantimki. Him and his lady Rosin and their pɨnmi even Meadow. Tanantimki. What is Meadow's Indian name?
Tímaš.
Oh yeah, ģitāmaq, and that's an area upon our ceded lands. Yeah. Tímaš.
Yeah, just if I can provide a couple of words of encouragement, when Nixyáawi Skuulitpamápa, ʻiipn, we did do immersion for a couple of weeks, and it was very encouraging at that time because I ended up feeling like I can't say anything, and so I began ʻiipn, ycqi, and I started kind of forgetting English. And I remember someone was asking me about, I couldn't even think of the English word for a beaver. I was like, wish push, but I don't remember what it is in English. And that was really profound to me at that time. This was years ago. And I was fascinated by it. But there was, earlier I said there was 5 of us students at that time, but we weren't acquiring it at the same rate. And I think that it kind of frustrated some of the elders because they would try to stay in the language, but they kind of felt like they were talking to themselves. And there was only one of them that was animated enough to use a lot of body movement to convey what they were talking about in the language, and doing it in person, and you having a whole classroom to move around and holding up objects and sorts. And so to kind of help us out, those elders, and they'd have different class times. We'd have ʻiipn, she would come in the mornings, and then and then they would have conversation a little bit. But it was interesting too to see that dynamic because ʻiipn, she spoke really fast, and ʻiipn understood, but the way she formulated things wasn't as fast. And so sometimes it would seem like ʻiipn would have, a lot of things to say, so to say. And one was an aunt and one was a niece. But they were both great teachers. But ʻiipn was very animated, and ʻiipn, she still teaches today. And she really has a lot of spiritual teachings and knows a lot of songs. And to see them two work together, because even ʻiipn would be very forthright that she can't and shouldn't interpret a lot of washout songs because she didn't grow up that way, and there's some songs and some words in the longhouse that were not everyday language, and so she didn't feel comfortable working on those types of lessons. So they'd have their class time on awku, ititamała, then he would come and he would say, no writing, just listen. But to help go back to ʻiipn and ʻiipn, they would, to help convey a little bit, because some of us wasn't acquiring it as fast as they would like, then they opted to share the orthography that they had been taught by the linguists with the elders back in the 70s and 60s when they were all developing the orthography and the writing system. And ʻiipn and ʻiipn were actually really good tímaš. And so they would go ahead and they just would say, well, it seems like you're not understanding, so I'm going to write on the whiteboard. And they were pretty proficient at the orthography, even as elders. And so I started to realize, well, I need to have homework too. So I started to really narrow my interest into listening and hearing, but also taking the orthography and the dictionaries and the texts and the transcriptions that we had access to, and I'd create my own homework. And I'd look at these variations of like tima, right? It's just to write. And elders would say tima sometimes it could stand alone, but that would mean like right now. And they would add a whole bunch of, things onto that word whenever they would use it. It was rare for them to ever just say tima, unless they said, oh, tima, now I'll write. And that just fascinated me. So, and I wanted to encourage my subsequent lamaman. And so I just started to take a lot of language home and really look at the text, because I didn't have the ability to take nchi and chima home with me every day. I could just take their texts and their writing, and I would just study it. And I ended up becoming learning much faster. So I would then ask them, like, I only have this word written, but I'm wondering if I'm saying it right. And so I'd say it to them as it's written. And then by them saying or nwityaw, or maybe they'll giggle a little bit, it at least allowed me to learn the orthography fairly well for me to develop my own homework. And so as you see, there is a lot of different materials that we could use to support our homework, so to say. And so if you get a chance or have an interest to look into some of that, you'll find that there's some incredible information in even the texts. And I do support and understand that there are still elders even today that do not support, us writing the language for a lot of different reasons. Well, at the same time, if you ever look at the dictionaries for Yakima, Warm Springs, Umatilla, there are some pretty prominent names that are cited that did contribute to those texts. And I would just encourage you to just take a look at them. So.
Hey, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Katiayo.
Yeah, your mom, what was your mom's name?
Elizabeth was my mother and Lita was my grandmother.
Okay, Lita and Beatrice and William were brothers and sisters. They all had the same mother. Pɨnmi, just to kind of share with you what I've been digging around in some things. Elizabeth Chapman, my cousin Beatrice, we was up there cleaning graves one time at Agency Cemetery, and then she says, there's an unmarked grave here, but there was a young boy that went by the name of Philo Hill. And I said, oh, and I had no clue. But anyway, I got some census material from back in 1933 that lists your great grandmother, Elizabeth C. Dot, and then it goes, she was listed as Elizabeth Hill.
Oh.
And I don't know who of the hill that she had maybe temporarily or shortly married or whatever. And it may have been my own grandfather, Antoine, or, you know, there could have been another hill there somewhere, but there was something to kind of find that kind of material out. So I was trying to ask Virgil for a family tree, you know, because I know that Isaac Patrick was one of their elders, one of you guys' elders on, you know, one side of the family. And so some of the material that I've been given has been from one Yakima relative, Miles Miller, and he's, I don't know if any of you guys check out ancestry.com or not, but the census, and a lot of those census, some of it's not totally accurate, but some of it's, you know, fairly close enough to where sometimes they list the head of household or sometimes the moms or whatever, but they, you know, it's something that, you know, from the 1890s, maybe even possibly 1880s on up, you know, to temporary times of how that our families are listed back in those times, our early elders, you know, in family history tracing. And a shiman and a shinpo at naami naimum, you know, and a shinpo at naami naimum. Who our relatives were.
Well, that's very interesting to hear about. We were just talking about cleaning graves. I was talking to my son about that, going up there and cleaning graves, because, and why we do that. In fact, maybe he asked, well, why don't we have somebody who goes up there and keeps them clean? I said, well, from my understanding, it is because we are supposed to take care of our family after they go. So it is our job to go up there and make sure that they have clean graves. It's a sign of respect. I hope I told him right. Maybe you can tell me and make sure that I'm teaching my kids right.
Yeah, that's you know, it's quite a task in itself that, you know, some maybe don't feel comfortable in going to cemeteries at all, or even funerals. But same time, sometimes that's the only time that we're able to teach our, you know, younger about who family is, who
Yes.
family was. And you know, that used to be something our grandmother used to make us do, help them in the kunam, ʻiipn and the kunam naami ʻiipn and the ku naami ʻitamała and the ukʷana for pawa Nixyáawi, you know, where they're placed, where they're put away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, you know, then over time, and it would be an all-day thing, and there was never no supposed taboo that was told to us at that time about being in the cemetery in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But today, you know, because of, you know, when I got married and I learned from my wife, you know, and you know, and some others, you know, that chaunamun na winacha knan and kumun iwat nikush papachu anna and nikui patchwain. So we don't go in there after noon, after the high noon or in the afternoon, for whatever reasons, and just a belief, I guess. And so that's why a lot of times burials would take place, you know, in the morning or at sunrise, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my grandma taught me a lot, and so did my Uncle Virgil. And you know, when I teach my kids what I know, what they have taught me, sometimes they ask me, well, why? And I said, I don't, you know, sometimes I have to tell them, well, I don't know why. It's just because that's what I was told, and that's what we do. And I did, you know, I didn't question why. That's what I was told to do, and that's what you're supposed to do. So sometimes I don't have those answers.
Yeah. Nixyáawi wa quick alikalat noon papachu an or noon.
Putum wasklik akwai
Put them to wash click.
10 minutes.
Oh, ciao. Nishashap nishams. Mishkwai iwa quick and a kush for noon. Nishalaksha.
Oh yeah, papachu. Papachu squid.
About that, what is the breakdown of like sitcom sonnet?
Sitcom san. What did I hear about that? Sitcom san. Is that isn't that kind of a reference for I'm not sure if that's jargon or something. Sitcom san.
Yeah.
What do you know about it?
Like I've heard elders use it, sitcom sonnet, quartet, lunchtime, or sitcom sonnet, but maybe it's more in reference to eating.
Huh. Sitcom san, huh?
Yeah. But you've heard that before, right? I don't want to get us too off subject.
But it does have a reference here in the Kui shmi tímaš na sitcom san noon. Sitcom san sitcom sani. They eat lunch. That's what that has a reference for. Yeah, it's a good point. In the Yakima dictionary here, that's how she has that in her own spelling though. CSITKUMSAAN. Kumsan. Auna sitkum sanita. Auna sitkum sanita. I'm going to eat lunch now. So she has it.
We've got it in the Umatilla dictionary as well. Both entries are citing Bruce Rigsby. Seems to be the same.
Oh, commission.
Terminology.
Push Chikuk. I've learned something today too. Yeah, it's good. And the Nixyáawi the ku mustashna.
I had a question on just clarifying one of your phrases you gave earlier. Kunam. What are you thinking? There's an elder that always usually after he says, Nixyáawi Community, and then sometimes he'll say like that's more like, so what are you thinking about, right?
Yeah, what are you thinking about? Yeah, tukinam. Yeah, that's just my own. I think probably my own way of probably saying it. Like just like tunmashwa. Tunmashwa is, would be like having a reference of like actually what is it that you have, but then like what is it that you have as far as like the way that I was asking it this morning to my class, tímaš, what is it that you have, like your thoughts? Kushnish timana. So that was, yeah, that's a good reminder of like tukinam fusha. It kind of, you know, like, what are you thinking? Almost in another way too, like taiku kushnam fusha. Now, why you're thinking that way, right? Or tuiyai. All these variations.
Yeah. And that's what our elders remind us too, like phrase memorization will get us so far, but we have to also know the variances, you know, in different contexts, you know. And so they'd say, you know, there's a lot of different ways to say that. And so they sometimes spit out 5 different ways, you know, and they'd say, you need to learn all of them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Aku kushkichi iwata shapawataki Jonathan shapawatakta YouTube up. Not Jonathan. And
Niix, am I going to put this on the YouTube channel?
Is that what we do, right? After it's recorded?
Yeah, usually they go up the day after. Sometimes it takes a little longer.
Okay, so for further review, anatun peshna, tímaš kushki sinwit, whatever that we're writing and talking here. Pain iwata inmi, subsequent ititamała. So here, be getting ready for my afternoon classes. Any good? I'm glad that you joined us. Kunam ititamała subsequent yaw. Call it Zoom. Yeah, my ititamała. If someone has another way to be able to say Zoom, then too much.
Zoom.
Used to think my other Indian name was Tuk. Yeah. Hurry up. Yeah.
Kamash inchi payamas kwatanawa na mwachana subsequentash naami tanan tumtki sinwit.
Yeah. Mishnama brasna na mishwai uwalatitpa mishnama tun mashwap fit tukin nam fisha.
Nixyáawi.
Any closing thoughts?
I would like to go over songs at some point, and I really appreciate you taking the time to teach us. I've learned a lot in the last year or so. But yeah, songs are one of the things that I would like to learn, as well as what we have already been learning.
Oh, Kamish. The question na witmita na manina akushna kutachna. We can decide on how we can do that. Awa tio waptaika shiwa shapawataki alikalat kakinash ku tanakan Damien, Thomas and Lindsay, Hadapat, Thomas, they've made a recording of a lot of songs, the straight Washit songs, and I think Thompson ukʷana na alikalat.
Thompson.
Oh, just Jisim quick what takesh wash at me.
Good.
Vaishnam anitachna wiwalititpamam and Nixyáawi and the kush awata and the kush nichpa ayikta shapashikwatash. So I'm just seeing if Damien would be able to make you a copy of that, of their recording that they've made a few years ago. That would be helpful. But then eventually, you know, it's like me, I'm still learning. There's one song that I'm stumped on though, that I need to, whenever I get the time to be able to learn one song and you know, and it keeps ringing, and it's funny because I'll learn, I know certain parts of it, then I don't know. And then I was thinking about that. Chow tai and kush anak when the shop tight, kush chow ashik kush wawina. No way to carry that song because I don't know how it really goes, thoroughly goes. So yeah.
The other day I had an experience with that, you know, even though I've been drumming for as long as I have, you know, I always say, you know, I don't know everything. But I've been done the best I can for years. And I think someone thought I knew this particular song. And so they started the song, and here they didn't even know it. So I was just drumming along with them, and then it turned into a bunch of mumbling. And then after the song, one of the elders like, so what's that song about? And well, he couldn't answer. And so she was nice about it, but she just kind of reminded, you know, if you don't know the song, don't start songs like that. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always a big worry for me. This challenge, tamslamawita tamsin with wataykishna, you know, to not get lost in those songs with words in them. Kumish ukʷana na wawina. Now we're in the Nixyáawi subsequent. So just go this far today. And the kuam this course now are some of this and the kupampation kick Nixyáawi. Níix nwityaw my. Good to see you all.
Níix matashkinu.
Kumish.
Kino tamatash akwe.
Anta tsi tamusiapa. Yeah.
Yeah. Atla, Federico Pushtai, Likuk.
Chikuk, likuk.